It started innocently enough, or so I thought. My name's Josh, and for the last 6 years, I've been grinding away in construction, clocking 60-hour weeks to make ends meet for my wife, Lisa, and our 2 kids, Emma and Noah. Lisa stayed home, managing the house and handling the finances. I trusted her completely. She was the one who balanced the budget, and every time I asked about our savings or bills, her answer was the same: "We're barely making it, Josh. You need to work harder." So, I did. I picked up overtime shifts, working late into the night, sometimes missing dinner and bedtime stories with the kids. The days blurred together: wake up before the sun, come home long after it set. I told myself it was worth it. Emma and Noah were happy, weren't they? Lisa seemed stressed, but I thought that was just part of being a mom managing the chaos of 2 kids. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd remind myself this was all for them, for us. The house needed repairs. The car needed servicing. Lisa said the credit card bills were higher than usual. Groceries, school supplies, it all adds up, she'd explain, showing me a stack of receipts. "I'm trying my best to keep us afloat, Josh. We're a team, but we're barely making it." Hearing that would light a fire under me. I'd take on more hours, telling myself it was temporary, that things would ease up soon. Except they never did. Lisa always reassured me it was just a rough patch, and I never doubted her. Why would I? She was my partner, the one I married because I believed in us. One night, I was in the garage fixing Emma's dollhouse. The thing had been wobbling for weeks, and Emma was convinced her dolls were scared to live there. I had the screwdriver in one hand and a plank of wood in the other when Emma came bounding in, her pigtails bouncing. "Daddy, when can we visit Grandma and Grandpa again?" she asked, her big eyes blinking up at me. I paused mid-turn of the screw. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You've been staying with them," I said, brushing a smudge of sawdust off her cheek. Lisa always told me she left the kids with my parents whenever she had errands or appointments. It was one of the few things that made me feel better about being gone so much. They had family nearby. Emma tilted her head, her lips forming a small pout. "No, we always stay with Grandpa and Grandma's house, but Mommy doesn't come. She says she has work." The screwdriver slipped from my hand, clattering onto the workbench. "What?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mommy doesn't stay with you?" Emma shook her head, her tone matter-of-fact. "Nope. She drops us off, says she has to do something important, and leaves." I forced a smile, ruffling her hair. "Okay, sweetie. Go get ready for bed. I'll be up in a bit to read to you." As she skipped away, my mind spun. Work? Lisa never mentioned work. She didn't have a job, not that I knew of. I sat there in the silence of the garage, the sound of the screwdriver still echoing in my ears. For the first time in years, doubt crept in. That was the first crack in Lisa's story. The next morning, I woke up before Lisa, my chest tight with anticipation. "I need the truth," I muttered to myself as I stared at the ceiling. The doubt planted by Emma's words the night before had grown into a full-blown storm in my mind. Lisa was still asleep when I left the house, claiming I had an early shift. Instead, I called my boss and asked for a day off. "Family emergency," I said. That wasn't a lie, was it? I parked down the street from our house, waiting. When Lisa left with the kids, I followed, keeping a safe distance. My heart pounded with every turn. Was this paranoia? Was I about to uncover something innocent? I wanted to believe I was wrong. She drove straight to my parents' house and dropped off Emma and Noah. I watched as my mom greeted them with open arms, Lisa waving briefly before heading back to her car. "She's just running errands," I whispered, trying to reassure myself. But instead of heading to the grocery store or the post office, Lisa took a route I didn't recognize, one that led out of town. My palms were slick on the steering wheel as I trailed her to a secluded area near the woods. She turned onto a narrow gravel path, her car kicking up a cloud of dust. I hung back, parking just out of sight and walking the rest of the way. That's when I saw it, a small, unassuming cabin tucked among the trees. It looked ordinary enough, but my gut told me this was far from normal. The cabin door opened, and Lisa stepped out. My breath caught in my throat as a man followed her, closing the door behind him. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, with a confident swagger and the kind of grin that screamed trouble. He wore a tight-fitting shirt that showcased his athletic build, and the way Lisa looked at him, like a giddy teenager, made my stomach churn. I ducked behind a tree, watching as they laughed together. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and she leaned into his touch. Then they held hands, walking inside like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to burst through the door, to scream, to demand answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the cold realization that I needed proof. Without it, she could deny everything. I stayed there for what felt like hours, rooted to the spot. When the door closed behind them, it felt like the final nail in the coffin. Eventually, I dragged myself back to my car and drove home, my thoughts racing. Once I got back, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened Lisa's laptop. I hadn't touched it in months. She was the one who managed our bills and bank accounts. I logged in, my hands trembling, and began combing through our finances. What I found made my blood run cold. There were charges for fancy restaurants I'd never heard of, boutique shops I'd never visited, and expensive hotels that didn't match any family trips we'd taken. There was jewelry, designer clothes, spa treatments, things Lisa had never mentioned, and certainly hadn't shown me. My stomach dropped when I saw a receipt for a men's watch, purchased just a week ago. It was clear she wasn't just cheating, she was using our hard-earned money to spoil him. I scrolled further, finding payments for rentals. That cabin. My jaw clenched as I realized how long this had been going on. I checked the dates and compared them to my overtime shifts, and it all clicked. Every time I worked late or took on extra hours, she had been meeting him. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or a fleeting mistake. This was deliberate. She had planned this, built an entire secret life, while I was breaking my back to provide for her and the kids. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. The anger was there, bubbling beneath the surface, but it was the hurt that consumed me. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye every day, kiss me goodbye, and then run off to him? But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. I needed a plan, a way to expose her lies and make sure she couldn't talk her way out of this. As I sat there, the pieces began to fall into place. Confronting Lisa without concrete proof would be a mistake. She'd deny it, twist the story, and somehow make me look like the bad guy. I needed something irrefutable. Something that would leave no room for excuses. That night, after putting Emma and Noah to bed, I told Lisa I had an early shift in the morning and wouldn't be home for dinner. She barely looked up from her phone. "All right, drive safe," she said casually, as if nothing was wrong. The next day, I dropped the kids at my parents' house under the guise of them spending some quality time with their grandparents. My mom was thrilled, as always. "Don't work too hard, Josh," she said with a smile. I nodded, knowing I wouldn't be working at all. Instead, I drove to a spot down the road from the cabin, the same place I'd parked before. Hours passed as I watched the gravel driveway through the windshield. I had packed sandwiches, but I couldn't eat. The thought of what I might see churned my stomach. Just after noon, Lisa's car rolled up, her shiny sedan kicking up dust as it stopped outside the cabin. I gripped the steering wheel, every muscle in my body tense. Not 5 minutes later, he he arrived. Same smug grin, same swagger, as if he owned the world. He got out of his car and opened the cabin door like he belonged there, holding it for Lisa. She giggled, flipping her hair as she stepped inside. The door shut behind them. I wanted to kick the door down right then and there, but I knew better. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. Instead, I called my dad. "Can you and Mom meet me?" "It's important," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "What's going on?" he asked, immediately concerned. "I'll explain everything when you get here," I replied. "Just bring Mom, and don't bring the kids." Within half an hour, their car pulled up behind mine. I quickly filled them in. My dad's jaw tightened as I spoke, his fists clenching at his sides. My mom, always the quiet one, shook her head in disbelief, tears welling up in her eyes. "Josh, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sure, Mom," I said. "I need you both there. I can't do this alone." We walked down the gravel path toward the cabin. The closer we got, the more I could hear the faint sound of laughter and muffled voices coming from inside. My dad took the lead, his shoulders squared with purpose. My mom stayed close behind me, her hand gripping my arm. When we reached the front door, I tested the knob. It turned easily. Of course, it wasn't locked. Why would they lock it when they thought they were completely safe? We stepped inside, and the reality of what I was walking into hit me like a sledgehammer. The smell of expensive cologne hung in the air, mixing with the faint scent of Lisa's perfume. Shoes were tossed near the door, his sneakers and her familiar heels. From the hallway, we could hear them. Laughter. Whispers. The sound of betrayal wrapped in the comfort of their secret hideaway. I motioned for my parents to stay back as I walked toward the noise. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat a mix of anger and heartbreak. The bedroom door was ajar, just enough for me to see shadows moving inside. I pushed it open, my stomach churning. There they were, tangled in the sheets, completely oblivious to the world outside. Lisa was laughing at something he'd said, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen in years. Then my dad's voice boomed from behind me, cutting through the air like a thunderclap. "What the hell is this?" Lisa screamed, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. Her lover, Nick, as I'd later learn, froze like a deer in headlights. His smirk vanished, replaced by pure, unfiltered panic. "Josh, I can explain," Lisa started, but my dad cut her off. "Explain? You think there's anything you can say to explain this?" he roared, his face red with fury. Nick stammered, trying to grab his clothes. I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" I snapped, stepping forward. "That she's married? That I'm the guy breaking his back to pay for this?" I gestured at the room, at the sheets, at them. My mom, standing in the hallway, let out a shaky sigh. "How could you, Lisa?" she whispered, her voice heavy with disappointment. Lisa's face was a mess of tears and panic. "It's not what it looks like," she pleaded, clutching the sheets to her chest. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice ice cold. I turned to Nick, who was hastily trying to pull on his pants. "You've got 2 minutes to get out of here before I drag you out myself." Nick didn't argue. He fumbled with his shoes and bolted out of the room, not even bothering to button his shirt. The sound of his car peeling out of the driveway was oddly satisfying. Lisa sat there, trembling, her face pale. "Josh, please," she started, but I held up a hand. "Save it," I said. "You've already said enough." She looked at me, her eyes wide with desperation, but I couldn't feel anything but anger. "Not anymore." I turned to my dad. "Let's go." As we left the cabin, I could hear Lisa crying behind me. But I didn't look back. This wasn't over, not yet. Exposing them in the cabin was only the beginning. I'd spent the entire drive home thinking about what to do next. I wasn't going to let Lisa slither her way out of this. She had betrayed me, betrayed our kids, and used the life I'd built for her to fund her affair. If she thought she could walk away unscathed, she had another thing coming. That night, after tucking Emma and Noah into bed at my parents' house, I got to work. The first step was securing our home, my home. I called a locksmith and had every single lock changed. Front door, back door, even the garage. While the locksmith worked, I packed up Lisa's belongings. Clothes, shoes, makeup, every trace of her. I stacked the boxes neatly in the garage, leaving just enough space for her car. By the time the house was secure, it no longer felt like hers. Then, I sat down at the kitchen table with the divorce papers I'd prepared. I had gathered every piece of financial evidence, credit card statements, receipts, even the lease agreement for the cabin. I highlighted the charges that proved she'd been using our money to bankroll her affair. There was no way she could deny it. The papers also outlined my request for full custody of Emma and Noah. I wasn't about to let her selfishness drag our kids through this mess. The last thing I did before heading to bed was tape a letter to the front door. It was short and to the point. Lisa, your belongings are in the garage. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Do not contact me unless it's about the kids. The next morning, I made a cup of coffee and waited. Lisa would be back soon, probably expecting a tearful apology or some groveling on my part. She had no idea what was waiting for her. It was just after 10 a.m. when her car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out, her phone in hand, probably texting Nick. She approached the front door and stopped, noticing the letter taped to it. Her brow furrowed as she read it, and then she tried the doorknob. Locked. She knocked, then banged on the door. Josh! Open the door, she yelled. I stayed where I was, sipping my coffee. After a few minutes, she stormed to the garage. I heard the door creak open and then the sound of boxes being shoved around. A moment later, she was back at the front door, hammering with her fist. Josh, let me in. This is my house too. Finally, I opened the door just enough to meet her furious glare. Not anymore, Lisa, I said, my voice calm. You've made your choices. Now you can live with them. Her expression shifted from anger to desperation. Josh, please. We can work this out. I cut her off. Work this out. You lied to me, cheated on me, and used our money to do it. There's nothing to work out. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered the laughing, the hand-holding, the dinners and gifts she had bought with the money I had worked so hard to earn. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, I said, shutting the door firmly. Nick wasn't off the hook either. That same morning, I sent copies of the credit card statements and receipts to his employer. It wasn't hard to find his company online. Lisa had conveniently left a receipt from a dinner they'd shared with his name and workplace on it. I included a polite note, your employee, Nick, last name, has been using funds stolen from my family to enjoy extravagant meals and gifts. I thought you'd want to know who you're employing. By the end of the week, word got back to me through mutual acquaintances, Nick had been fired. Without Lisa's money to cushion his lifestyle, he was in the same boat as her, broke and scrambling. Lisa tried to fight back. She called and texted incessantly, leaving long, rambling voicemails about how sorry she was, how she had made a mistake, how we could fix this for the kids. I ignored every single one. The kids stayed with me at my parents' house while Lisa crashed with a friend. Then came the legal battle. She hired a lawyer and tried to paint me as the bad guy, claiming I worked too much and neglected her. But I had the receipts, literally. Every dollar she had spent on her affair was documented. Every lie was laid bare. When her lawyer saw the evidence, he advised her to settle quickly. The final court decision was swift. I got full custody of Emma and Noah, with Lisa allowed supervised visits. The house was mine, and Lisa was ordered to pay child support. She had dug her own grave, and now she had to lie in it. The last time I saw Nick was at the grocery store. He was in the frozen food aisle, looking haggard and unkempt. He spotted me and tried to duck into another aisle, but I wasn't about to let him get away. "Nick," I called out, my voice loud enough to make heads turn. He froze, a bag of frozen peas in his hand. "How's the job hunt going?" His face turned bright red. "Look, man, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand." I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, well, sorry doesn't pay the bills, does it? Next time, maybe think twice before messing with someone else's family." He didn't respond, just scurried away like the coward he was. As for Lisa, she still tries to text me from time to time, usually to complain about how hard things are for her. I don't reply. My focus is on Emma and Noah. They deserve better than the mess she created. Revenge wasn't just about exposing them, it was about reclaiming my life and protecting my kids. And in the end, I walked away with everything that truly mattered.